Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today. I'm Ken Edwards, the Sustainability Officer for City of Delray Beach, and also Mary Wasney is the Assistant Sustainability Planner for the city. We're very glad to have you with us today, and also very pleased to have Emily Bowers, the Director of State and Local Affairs for the Green Building Initiative with us, and also Nina Armstrong from GBI is with us today. Emily provides support to GBI, working with state and local government entities, as well as policymakers, and provides educational resources on existing green building requirements. Emily is a Atlanta native and has worked for nearly a decade in outreach, advocacy, and public policy. And she enjoys helping communities become more resilient, sustainable, and efficient through green buildings. Emily will be given the second part of the presentation today. Just to note that everyone is on mute except for the presenter during the presentations. We will have time for questions at the end, and chat is also. We'll make accommodations for questions at the end of the presentation today. And first, I would like to start off with a overview of the city's green building ordinance. This is something that we're very excited about and passed last year. So the question may well be why green building ordinance and why green buildings are important. And ultimately, the answer really is greenhouse gases. I mean, there are a lot of good things about green buildings, but the really critical major issue is addressing greenhouse gases. So the city recently did a greenhouse gas inventory for 2019 data, and we found that 44% of the emissions in Delray Beach come from buildings, and this is well within the typical range. It's nearly half of emissions. So if we are going to reach goals of reducing carbon emissions by 50% by the year 2030 and reach net zero by 2050, then we really have to address emissions from buildings. And ultimately, we need to address greenhouse gases so that we offset the impacts of climate change. So we work very hard and passed the Green Building Ordinance. And some of the main features for that ordinance, there are 4 green building certification programs that are cited. The Green Building Initiative is the focus of the presentation today. We had a NGBS presentation last week, and in the coming weeks, LEED and FGBC will present for the city. We're very excited about that for Earth Month. In the ordinance, there are 2 tiers for buildings of 15,000 to 50,000 square feet throughout the city. A minimum level certification is required. So that would be a certified level or 1 globe or bronze level. And that's 1 building on a single parcel or buildings as a part of a unified development. And the second tier is a silver level or equivalent requirement. So that would be 2 globes for buildings of 50,000 square feet or larger, and that's throughout the city. Ordinance does not apply to historic buildings and many renovations. Just by the nature of conserving the materials that are in those types of buildings, there is a good bit of sustainability built into them. So those types of buildings don't fall under the ordinance. The effective date for the ordinance is November 1st, 2023. So later this year, we gave a year after the actual approval by the commission. And then there is a provision for reevaluation of the ordinance within 2 years. And the ordinance applies to city projects, just like other public and private kinds of projects. So what are the effects and considerations that we expect to see? We have an existing ordinance that just applies to the central business district. So this ordinance expands to the whole city, the two tiers that we talked about, and we expect to see a significant increase in the number of green buildings in the city, which is a very good thing for Delray Beach and the residents in Delray Beach. We will become known for having higher quality kind of construction that's verified through these third-party organizations, and also more efficient in preparing for the effects of climate change. So we expect to see that increase and associated benefits. In the 2-year reevaluation period, we can look at improvements. We'll monitor how it's working, and things like including provisions for EV and solar ready. Also, how might we design incentives to encourage even those buildings that don't have a requirement for getting a certification to get those, and also have incentives for attaining higher level of certification. The city's ordinance is consistent with Florida statute that requires governmental buildings to have a green building certification. We'll put more detail on that. And also, because the ordinance is designed to succeed, it is fairly conservative, though significant steps are being taken. We expect for it to succeed. And one of the important issues is that the process of permitting should not increase in the time frame. So we do expect for permitting to go forward, and it's not add on any time. So that's just a very brief overview, and with our contact information right here, it will be in the recording when that is posted. And at this point, I am really glad to introduce Emily Bowers, who's going to give an overview of the Green Building Initiative.
Thank you, Nina. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can.
Wonderful. It wouldn't be 2023 if there weren't some technical glitches, right? That's how it works. I'm so glad to be with all of you today, especially on a Friday. Speaking of technical glitches, let's see. All right. It should be back up now. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining us, especially on a Friday. I'm really excited to speak with all of you about GBI and Green Globes. But before we dive in, I just want to take a moment and say thank you to Kent and the team. It's been really lovely learning from Delray Beach, and we're so excited to see what wonderful work you're going to do through this Green Building Ordinance. So I just wanted to take the time and say thank you. And I also wanted to mention that this is an AIA registered course. So before Nina and I can dive in, there are a few housekeeping slides that I need to go through. So just hang with me. We have to read those verbatim, but then afterwards we can kind of get into the meat of the presentation and talk further about Green Globes. So without further ado, as I mentioned, this is an AIA registered course, so certificates of completion for both AIA members and non-AIA members are available upon request. If you want to receive your learning unit for attending today, just please send me a note with your AIA number and your name, and we can make sure to take care of that for you at GBI and get you those credits. So you can either email me or training@thegbi.org, which is shown on the right hand of the screen. We want to make sure everyone receives credit for today. Okay, this material is copyrighted. So this presentation is protected by US and international copyright laws. Reproduction, distribution, display, and use of the presentation without written permission of the speaker is prohibited. However, if you see anything that you'd like greater detail on or follow up, or if there are materials that we can share, please let us know. Just because we don't distribute this particular presentation does not mean that we don't want to be collaborative and show you what materials we do have. So just let us know if there's anything you'd like follow up on. All right, and quickly, I want to go through the course description. This course is intended for design and construction professionals interested in third-party sustainable building rating systems. It provides an introduction to the Green Building Initiative and an overview of the Green Globe certification with a primary focus on Green Globes for new construction. I'll talk a bit more in detail about our ANSI accreditation process as well, which we have taken Green Globes for new construction through. All right, and I won't go through these word by word, but we do have several learning objectives for today. Essentially, we just want to make sure that at the end of this presentation, you can recall Green Globe's criteria, you understand our environmental assessment areas, you have a greater understanding of our key concepts and criteria, and more understanding of who GBI is and our organizational structure and scoring method. So we're going to make sure to leave time, as Kent mentioned, for Q&A. But we really hope that you leave this presentation learning more about us and Green Globes, and Nina and I are always available for follow-up as well, even after this. So the Green Building Initiative is a 501c3 international organization, and our mission is to reduce climate impacts by improving the built environment. We do that primarily through two different programs, Green Globes, which we'll be speaking about today. However, we do have a green building system. It's the guiding principles compliance verification for federal buildings. And we do a lot of work with the DoD, the DOJ, the VA. So if you have questions or if you do a lot of federal projects and you'd like more information about that guiding principles compliance verification, let us know and we can follow up with you afterwards and share more about that part of GBI and the component that we have with federal buildings. One theme you'll note through the duration of this presentation is that we really believe in better buildings together. I recently was at a seminar in New York and someone shared that the world's building stock is going to double by 2060. And this means that we're building an entire New York City every month for the next 40 years, which is wild. So we really believe that every building can be doing something to become more efficient, sustainable, and resilient. And GBI is really a believer in having an adaptive and flexible system through Green Globe so that every project type and building type can do something to advance their sustainability initiatives. I love this slide. I think it's a really great representation of our impact to date. So GBI has certified over 500 million square feet of commercial and multifamily property and space globally. That's just under 3,000 projects certified, which we're coming up on 3,000 very soon. We have 540 in progress. And as you can see, we've registered and certified over 1,000 federal projects, which ties back to that guiding principles compliance verification that I mentioned previously. Now, Florida is really special to GBI because if you look at our footprint within the United States, we've certified more square feet and done more projects in Florida than any other state. We've actually certified about 37 million square feet of commercial and property space in Florida. So working with Delray and promoting the Green Building Ordinance is something that's very dear to our hearts, and we're excited to support the constituents in the city in any way possible through this. Right. One thing that makes GBI and Green Globes inherently different than what we see in the market is that we're an approved standards developing organization. And what that means is we take Green Globes for new construction and Green Globes for existing buildings through the ANSI process every 2 years. And for those of you who are on the call that work in city or state government, you can understand how arduous the public comment process is. But it's very important to us at GBI because we don't create Green Globes back of house and send it out to market. We make sure that it's publicly vetted. We have subject matter experts that come to the table. We want to make sure that we're bringing the best possible certification that reflects the market to communities as possible. So, for example, when we took our new construction program through the ANSI process, the very last time, it took 2 years, we had over 100 meetings. There were 219 comments submitted, 86% of which were either accepted or accepted with small modification. And we had 16 subcommittees and task groups formed to discuss in great detail all of our environmental assessment areas and the criteria within Green Globes. So having that component of publicly vetting what we bring to market is extremely important to us and something that a lot of our counterparts don't do in green building. We also had the very first certification that went through the ANSI accreditation process in 2010. So this has been a core tenet of GBI and Green Globes from the very beginning. Okay, who are we? Green Globes yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So Green Globes was actually formed in Canada. However, it was licensed for the US market in 2004. And the early adopters of Green Globes in the US saw that there were other certifications, namely LEED, that were doing fantastic work with Class A buildings. And they really just brought a whole new life to the green building movement. But there was building stock that wasn't Class A that still needed to be doing something to enhance their sustainability. And so Green Globes came to market and at first really addressed those Class B and C buildings. We looked at universities, certainly worked with different industry players to see what can we do. And that's how we got our footing in the United States market. By 2013, Green Globes was recognized and recommended as a preferred system by the federal government, namely GSA and DOE. By 2017, GBI obtained the global rights to Green Globes. And again in 2019, Green Globes was recognized and recommended by the federal government as a preferred system. So what does it look like for GBI and Green Globes in the future? Really focusing on now is global expansion. We have a 3-year plan that puts us in a position to expand globally. We're looking at partners in different regions of the world, different corners of the world. We're translating all of the Green Globes materials in different languages so that we can reach different audiences and making sure that we can, again, bring sustainability globally to different building owners and walk these project teams through Green Globes. All right, so these are some examples of the variety of third-party recognizers of Green Globes, and this is certainly not an all-inclusive list, but I did want to include this slide because I think it shows some of our partners that we work with most often, and I incorporated a few cities such as Baltimore, Chicago, and Charlotte, but we do a lot of work with Fannie and Freddie on our multifamily certification. I mentioned GSA previously, as well as a DoD and DA through that federal component, but we also work across systems. So for example, the International Well Building Institute recognizes GBI in their community standard. And sometimes what we'll see is dual certification of buildings through WELL and Green Globes or Green Globes and LEED. It's something that we're seeing more of, is that dual certification, and something that we definitely promote in-house. I also wanted to point out that we're recognized by GRESB under full points, or we're a tier 1 certifier through GRESB, and GRESB is the global real estate benchmarking for ESG, which is a component within Green Globes. And again, this is just a snapshot and breakdown of the way that we work within our system. So today we're going to be highlighting Green Globes for new construction. We also have Green Globes for existing buildings and Green Globes for sustainable interiors. And under each, there's the multifamily component and core and shell under existing buildings. One thing you'll note is that we have Green Globes Health and Wellness distinction noted. We have this distinction for the occupants and health of the building. However, we're also rolling out a Green Globes that is going to be a net zero carbon distinction later on this summer. We're really excited about it. It's going to be an on-ramp for buildings and large portfolios to recognize where they are with scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And I'm happy to share more about that if you're interested. But we're really excited, and we're going through the pilot phase right now and have cities rolling it out and trying it on their different building types. And we're very excited to bring that to market. So I do want to cover some program features, and Nina's going to be getting into our environmental assessment areas in greater detail momentarily, but I think it's important to showcase how we are a 3-in-1 certification. So sustainability, health and wellness, and resilience are the core tenets of Green Globes. And we're different in many ways, but the ones I noted here, we provide an interactive online questionnaire. So this questionnaire is different because as building types are going through certification, you can have as many people participate in that questionnaire as possible. We really promote a collaborative approach as project teams look through and see where they're at in their sustainability journey. We don't have a one size fits all prerequisite list. An example of this is we do a lot of work with museums in DC, for example. And obviously, with a museum, you can't have windows because it would compromise the integrity of the art. And so, daylighting is not something that these buildings could really strive for. But because we don't have prerequisites and it's not a one size fits all certification, we can be adaptable and flexible for the building type. Another example is I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I grew up in a very rural town, and public transit was just not something that existed within the infrastructure of my community. So if a building type wanted to certify, but we didn't have that, baked in service of public transit, you wouldn't get docked. And so we try to be really flexible and adaptive. Um, um, we have multiple pathways and provide many options for certification. We implant what's known as a Green Globes assessor, which is a third-party assessor that has over 10 years of experience in either engineering or architecture to walk project teams through the whole duration of certification. For new construction, a new build certification takes about 4 to 6 months on average. For existing buildings, it's about 3 to 5 months. And that assessor works with the project through the entire duration of certification. And another thing that I'd like to highlight is that Green Globes always meets jurisdictional requirements for certification. So it doesn't matter what your state building energy code is, project teams have to first meet the jurisdictional code set by the state or city before certifying within Green Globes. So that's very much baked into the certification. Okay. So commercial real estate comes in many forms. We're adaptable and comprehensive in that we certify hospitals, certainly entertainment, data centers is a huge pillar for us recently, hospitals, multifamily, universities. We really work across all building types. One thing that I love to point out is that we've certified really every building on the Las Vegas Strip, but then also a Whole Foods a few blocks down. So it really showcases the work that we do and the adaptability within Green Globes and commercial property. And I did also just want to showcase our clients across government and industry. And you'll note that Georgia State University is pinned out. I had to incorporate my alma mater, but we have clients across public and private sectors that have certified through Green Globes and work with GBI very closely. We do a ton of work with Publix, and I know that's a huge conglomerate in Florida, but certainly different universities and public sectors. We do a lot with the National Institute of Health. And so while this is not a comprehensive list, I think it's really nice just to see our impact in the marketplace and how it looks very different. All right, and I'm just gonna quickly pause and turn it over to Nina, who's gonna be talking about our software and some of our environmental assessment areas.
All right, thank you so much, Emily. So yeah, I'm going to review the Green Globe software. It is really very interactive and intuitive. There are additional information pop-ups that include tooltips, assessment guidance, references, and scoring matrices. There is an activity log that allows you to exchange comments and attach supporting documentation to particular criteria for review by your assessor and within the project team. We also offer detailed assessment reporting, and that includes a detailed scoring breakdown, point variances. There's a section for verification that is required, as well as recommendations by your assessor. So there is performance tracking. So project teams are able to track energy, water, waste, and emissions data directly within the software. And we also offer comparison reporting. And so this comparison can be within a portfolio or even across multiple different portfolios. So Each Green Globes program, as mentioned before, is based out of a maximum of 1,000 total points. And then criteria is going to be weighted according to environmental impact. We also have non-applicable designations, as Emily was speaking about before. So you won't be penalized for criteria that doesn't apply to your project or building type. So our certification goes through 4 levels. There is 1 through 4 Green Globes, with 4 Green Globes being the highest level of certification. And the ratings will be based on the percentage of points achieved out of the total number of applicable points to your project. So the minimum score required to certify at the first level of certification, the 1 Green Globes level, is 35%. And there are no prerequisites other than the 35% minimum required to certify, and of course the jurisdictional requirements from the project. You can go to the, okay, so as mentioned before, we have our 3 certification programs under the Green Globe system. So there's sustainable interiors, new construction, and existing buildings. And you can see all the environmental assessment areas for each program listed here. So for new construction, there are 6 environmental assessment areas. We have project management, site, energy, water efficiency, materials, and indoor environment. And you can see that the environmental assessment areas are pretty similar throughout all 3 of the programs. So existing buildings incorporates ESG management rather than project management. And then the sustainable interiors program doesn't include site. So I'm going to be going into more detail on our new construction module today. So Green Globes for new construction evaluates the intended performance of a ground-up construction, renovation, or an addition project. And it's really designed to help project teams to achieve higher levels of performance and sustainable design. It also helps users identify targets and goals for creating a green building and assess intended building performance. So this diagram on screen demonstrates the Green Globes for New Construction 2021 point allocation by environmental assessment area. So you can see that energy has the largest percentage of points, followed by water efficiency, materials, or water efficiency, and then we have materials, indoor environment, and site that are all weighted equally. And then project management has slightly fewer points, but it represents 10% of the overall points. So the first environmental assessment area is project management. The team and owner planning consists of written performance goals set at pre-design that include site design, environmentally responsible construction activities, water conservation, building envelope and moisture control, energy efficiency, and various disciplines should be represented as part of an integrated design process. The team and owner planning should also evaluate building risk assessment, which identifies risks to the building, including continued building occupancy resulting from extreme natural events, global climate change, and human activity for the expected service life of the building. The building risk assessment has to be conducted and provided to building owners and designers, and this assessment identifies hazards and also evaluates the probability and severity of occurrence of those events. And so these hazards include things like weather, flooding, seismic and volcanic events, wildfire, etc. This assessment area also evaluates environmental management practices during construction and if an emergency management system is in place. Project teams can elect to perform a life cycle cost analysis or demonstrate a building service life plan, and these paths are weighted equally in terms of points. There is credit awarded for performing a moisture control analysis, and project teams also can choose the building commissioning and training pathway or the systems manual and training pathway. So the second environmental assessment area is site, and the first section is development area. That evaluates various aspects of site selection, including the consideration of urban infill and urban sprawl. Project teams are incentivized to choose a site that was previously developed and has been already served by existing utility and transportation infrastructure. Also incentivized to choose a brownfield or remediated Superfund site, as well as to avoid any sensitive sites and floodplains. And then the transportation section includes distance and feasibility to public transport, methods that are in place to reduce dependencies on single occupancy vehicles, alternative refueling facilities or charging stations that are either on site or nearby, as well as infrastructure to encourage biking. And it also looks at the walk score. And then construction impacts evaluate the measures that are used to minimize disturbance to the surrounding site. That includes the protection of existing trees and shrubs, mitigating heat island effects with vegetated, shaded, or high SRI roofs and permeable surfaces, as well as addressing bird strikes. And there are two different pathways for assessing erosion and sedimentation of equal weight. So they're weighted equally, and there's a formalized path and then a prescriptive path. And then for stormwater management, full credit is awarded for a site retaining at least 95th percentile of storm volume as per a site water balance assessment. It evaluates types of vegetation and irrigation practices of landscaping on site. There are two different pathways for assessing exterior light pollution. They're both of equal weight, and there's also a performance path and a prescriptive path to choose from. This area also includes considerations for wildland-urban interface site design to prevent fire hazard with reference to ICC 2015 International Wildland-Urban Interface Code. And so we'll move on to energy. So there are three pathways for assessing energy performance. There's path A, B, and C, as you can see on the screen here. The first two are worth 180 points. And then the path C, the prescriptive path, is worth up to 111 points. So non-modeled energy efficiency, that looks at impacts from elevators, escalators, and moving sidewalks, if applicable to your project. There's also lighting and HVAC systems capable of load shedding, appliances and equipment organized by location, energy-saving power strips and occupancy sensors. There's also credit for the implementation of a policy of all appliances to be Energy Star certified or meet other equivalent energy efficiency standards. So projects can earn credit for a percentage of a building's total site energy that is metered through building level energy meters. And there are three pathways for achieving credit for submetering. There's also a non-applicable option for buildings that are less than 20,000 square feet. So in this assessment area, it also looks at if there's a resource management plan that addresses all energy consuming areas of a building or a project, and that includes monitoring protocols as well. And then it's also going to look at if there are any on or off-site renewable energy sources. So we can move on to water efficiency. This evaluates water conserving fixtures, including WaterSense certified plumbing fixtures and appliances, as well as Energy Star labeled appliances with low water factors. It also looks at cooling towers, boiling and hot water systems. Water intensive applications, including commercial food service equipment, laboratory and medical equipment, laundry equipment, water features and pools, if applicable to the project. It also looks at water treatment, alternative sources of water like gray water and rainwater. It looks at submetering for all water-intensive indoor applications and potable water used for irrigation. So credit can be earned for meters and submeters that are linked to a meter data management system to monitor water consumption. There are also points available for leak detection devices and irrigation design that increases the percentage of landscaping that doesn't require irrigation, and best practices for irrigation when it's required. So the next section is materials, and Green Globes encourages life cycle thinking from project conception. So the first section is whole building life cycle assessment, and it evaluates a reduction in environmental impact by evaluating at least two different building designs using ASTM E2921-16A and using at least three impact indicators. So projects will receive credit once there's a 15% reduction in environmental impact that's demonstrated, up to full credit of 20 points for 25% or greater. It also looks at a product life cycle that evaluates third-party verifications that evaluate cradle-to-gate product life cycle for a minimum of 15 products, and the number of products that include verifications that evaluate the products through end of life cycle. There's also a product risk assessment that evaluates the number of formulated products that have completed an occupant exposure screening report that's prepared in accordance with ASTM E3 182-20. And points for this section are earned for discrete products with different functional uses and not variations of the same product unless the manufacturers show substantial differences between the chemical constituents or components. Credit can also be earned for sustainable material attributes based on the Sustainable Materials Index. So the percentage of the total value of the building materials that have sustainable materials attributes. And this is considered in calculating the SMI that are pre-consumer recycled content, post-consumer recycled content, bio-based content, and third-party sustainable forestry certifications content. And materials that meet the requirements of eco-certified composite sustainability standard. Building materials can also meet the requirements for the SMI with the sum of the value of these attributes divided by the total materials value expressed as a percentage, and full credit will be awarded at 38% or greater. And then in terms of reuse of existing structures and materials, this looks at a percentage of structural systems and non-structural interior systems and finishes from an existing building that are retained on site and then incorporated into the new design. So it's the percentage of the project that incorporates reused, refurbished, and or off-site salvage materials in place of new materials. And then all criteria in this section have a tiered scoring system. And then looking at reducing construction waste and diverting waste from landfills by reuse or recycling. So post-occupancy solid waste recycling rate verification through a third-party organization and supply chain waste minimization by sourcing products that come from facilities that divert over 80% of their waste. And then finally, in resource conservation, so this is evaluated as the percentage of the project that incorporates building elements produced by either modular construction, prefabrication, or both. And then credit is awarded to project teams who document the application of DFD principles and provide the owner with the deconstruction plan that addresses both partial and total deconstruction. And then finally, the final environmental assessment area is indoor environment. So the first and most substantial section is air ventilation and quality, and it makes up almost a third of the total points within indoor environment. It asks, is the quality of ventilation compliant with one of 4 standards or local codes or standards if they're more stringent? Looks at air change effectiveness, air handling equipment filtration, and CO2 sensing, and ventilation control equipment. And then we also have source control and measurement of indoor pollutants. And this includes evaluating and encouraging reduced VOCs. So there are 2 paths for achieving credit for pre-occupancy indoor air quality testing. It looks at carbon monoxide monitoring, Legionellosis mitigation in the building water systems, in implementing an integrated pest management strategy, and eliminating other indoor pollutants like tobacco and radon, et cetera. It also looks at lighting design and systems. It evaluates the daylighting levels and views for occupants, and the lighting design quantity and quality. Lighting sustainability, which awards credit if the output of lights has lost no more than 30% of their initial output at 35,000 hours, and if a lighting maintenance plan has been implemented. It also will look at thermal comfort zones. These are going to be specific to building types or not applicable to specific building types, as well as thermal comfort design, which looks at if HVAC systems are designed in conformance with ANSI ASHRAE Standard 55-2017, and thermal environmental conditions for human occupancy. It also looks at acoustical privacy and comfort, including noise limits and masking sound level. And there are specific assessment guidance provided for different building usage types. It'll also look at acoustic insulation and vibration insulation. And again, there will be specific assessment guidance provided for different building usage types for this criteria as well. And there are 2 pathways available for field testing prior to occupancy: reverberation time or ceiling noise reduction coefficient, which encourages a high percentage of space design that complies with the maximum reverberation time criteria in 2018 IGCC. Okay, so up on the screen here, this is just a list of a few examples of the supporting documentation that can be used for verifying criteria and awarding points that are being claimed. And you have open communication with your assessor through the assessment process. So they're also a really great resource in letting you know exactly the type of documentation that they're expecting to see. Okay, next slide. So this is the assessment process for new construction that can be seen up here on this slide. So the project team will complete and submit the new construction questionnaire, which is basically the criteria that make up the new construction program that's been made into a question set online for ease of use. So once that's submitted, GBI will schedule the preliminary review or the design review that typically takes place between 90 to 100% CDs. The project team will gather and submit documentation to their assessor for review. And then once the assessor has completed the preliminary assessment report, GBI will review it and then issue that to the client with a projected score. And then down the line, once construction is nearing completion, then the project manager will update the online questionnaire with anything that's changed since design, as well as gathering any outstanding documentation. GBI will then schedule the on-site assessment. And then once the on-site assessment is complete, the assessor will submit the final assessment report to GBI for review, and then GBI will review and then issue the final certification back. And then I'm going to briefly go over a few resources that are available to project teams when going through a Green Globes assessment. So we have access to free trials, which are essentially mock projects within our online software. The free trial doesn't include scoring, but it's just a great tool to familiarize yourself with the questionnaire. And free trials with scoring are available with GBI membership. We also have project checklists, which are a spreadsheet version of the criteria within the questionnaire to provide more information regarding the areas assessed and the associated maximum points available. We also have technical reference manuals for all of our available Green Globes programs, and that provides the entire criteria list and the entire online questionnaire in a PDF format, including all of the maximum points, scoring matrices, assessment guidance, and references and tooltips that are available in those as well. And then we have there are a couple different plaque options that you can purchase to demonstrate your achievements. We are also happy to create a project profile for your project. So we would just ask for a couple professional photographs, and then we'll have our writer contact the project team for an interview about the accomplishment and just your experience with Green Globes. We're also always happy to assist with any presentation opportunities and other promotional and educational content. We can go to the next slide. We also have a certified building directory on our website that lists all the Green Globe certified buildings across North America. So you're able to add specific parameters and search specific buildings to find buildings that you're looking for, and you can see it as a map across the whole country. So our pricing for our Green Globe certifications are totally transparent, and it is listed on our website. So for pricing for each stage of assessment is based on the gross square footage of the building, So you can see on the screen here, the range for pricing for both new construction and existing buildings assessment. So for new construction, on average, it would be about 14,000, and for existing buildings, on average, it would be about 9,500. But again, you can always, as long as you know the square footage of your building, you can figure out exactly how much the certification would cost. And so why Green Globes is the preferred choice. So project teams are reporting on average a 5 to 10% increase on property values for commercial real estate that's been third-party certified. We know that tenants want to see conservation of energy, water. They really care about a healthy indoor environment, and certification just helps to support tenant retention, really also helps with marketing this space. People also prefer Green Globes over some other third-party certifications for quite a wide variety of reasons, but some expert users of Green Globes are reporting that it is about 30 to 50% cheaper than some other certification systems. And project teams also receive a copy of the final assessment report that includes recommendations for performance improvement in the future. So gets rid of the need to really pay for additional consulting. And so I will now pass it back to Emily to finish us up.
Thank you so much, Nina. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to quickly highlight before we go to Q&A the different opportunities that we have to get plugged in at GBI. So in addition to certification, we do offer a few different credentials. So you're always welcome to join as a member. We don't necessarily do individual members, but your company or your city or whoever you work with is welcome to join as a GBI member. We have guiding Green Globes emerging professionals, pardon me, that are student-based or early in their career for that emerging professional component. And that's something that's really helpful because when they graduate or come into the workforce, they can say that they have this credential and that they have an understanding of sustainability. So we definitely love working with those GGEPs. We have Green Globes professionals and Green Globes fellows, and those are a bit different. It's for much more seasoned professionals that are in architecture, engineering, or construction. And then that guiding principles compliance federal component, we also have fellows that work with federal projects. One thing that isn't listed is the work that we're doing with our municipal membership, which we are launching this year. So many exciting things coming down the pipeline. But we have a variety of different states, cities, counties that are coming on, and we're hosting basically an opportunity for different jurisdictions to learn from one another. We're doing it quarterly, a meeting. We'll bring in a speaker that is a seasoned vet in one of our environmental assessment areas. So maybe a lighting designer or someone that works on federal projects or someone that really is doing great work with water to speak about what they're doing in sustainability. And then we're opening the floor for other cities and states in these jurisdictions to learn from one another and hear what they're doing and get a grasp of how maybe they can incorporate some sustainability practices in their own backyard that other folks are doing. So we really want it to be a collaborative offering. So please let me know if you'd like any more information on that. And that is it. So thank you so much for the time. I'm going to stop presenting so that we can do Q&A and I can see everyone's face.
Okay,
Right.
thank you so much, Emily and Nina. That was a great overview with, I think, just the right amount of detail and in a very concise time frame too. So I know I learned a lot. Okay, well, in the Q&A, Mary can enable everyone's microphones. If you have a question, you'll need to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I did just enable everybody's mic, so they should be able to unmute themselves and turn on their cameras if they want to say hello.
So I'll give a break here. I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to. I like to give everybody else a chance before I weigh in. but I don't mind starting off. So, um, just thinking about Florida specific as a market and the different kinds of environmental conditions that we face. In your experience with the large number of facilities in Florida, are there certain credit categories that people are using a lot and getting a lot of point value out of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the counties and cities that we work with in Florida are primarily looking at resiliency. So the building types that you have in Florida are much different than maybe what we'd see in Kansas City, right? And so because Green Globes is so adaptive and flexible, I think that's one thing that draws a lot of folks to our certification because it's a bit different. And so resiliency, energy efficiency, all of those things that Florida buildings inherently have to incorporate is something that puts them ahead of the game when certifying through Green Globes because that's such a large part of our environmental assessment area. It's about 26%. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I am really happy to see resiliency as a major issue. I mean, for Florida to be a viable place to live going forward, we really need to focus more on that, and certainly more than some other areas of the country. So thank you. Anybody else have a question that they would like to ask? And I do have some more. I the materials component and the point scores for the life cycle assessment is something that I think is wonderful. But the amount of information that suppliers need to provide is really a key component to making that cost effective. So my question is, are you seeing more suppliers that have that information together and can readily provide that to teams?
Think so. I think LCA is something that folks are just coming to us more with because they're more prepared. This is something that has been a talking point for quite some time, and now it's integrated into more certifications. And so I think, life cycle assessment is certainly something we're focused on. And I think that's now inherently part of certification. So buildings and project teams just know to come with it. And Nina might be able to answer this differently, but from my perspective, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen too many issues with it. One thing that's nice is that like with Green Globes being so flexible and adaptable, if that is like a barrier for your project, you don't have to complete it to certify. Yeah.
Okay, I do. I see that. As I have studied and looked at the different programs, uh, very valuable component and really gets to the heart of sustainability. But capturing that documentation really is the key. I don't want to hog the mic here. I have lots of other questions, but we're also coming up on the end of our hour, so I want to respect everybody's time. I do have one more question, but if someone else has one, then would love to hear that.
Yes, I have a quick question. Jim Bell with the City of Boca Raton. Percentage-wise, do you find the program more applicable to residential or commercial buildings?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'd love to find the breakdown for you between kind of what we do with multifam and, more of our commercial buildings. We don't certify any single family residential homes. So that's one thing that Green Globes doesn't do. I would venture to say, and Nina is our client service person, so I'm our policy guru, and she speaks more to kind of what we see with our client service system. Maybe she has a breakdown, but we do a lot of multifamily properties, a lot. And I would say that might be the primarily the big driver right now in 2023 of what we're seeing. Nina, do you think commercial is kind of 50-50, or what would you break that down as?
I believe that multifamily makes up about 40% of our, like the building types that we're certifying. So I think it's our most common building type that we're seeing. And we do a lot of, we're approved for use by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's green incentive programs. So we see a lot of multifamily building owners getting Green Globe certifications for that reason. So yeah, I think about 40% is multifamily.
And just one other question to add on to that question. How about in terms of square footage parameters? You find a success rate better, I assume would be better for larger size projects because they could do more elements, but does it really matter, or is there any kind of preferred square footage parameters?
Yeah, I'll take this and then Nina can speak to it. I don't think there's a preferred. We believe every building can be doing something, and because we're so adaptive and flexible, there's certainly room for every building to be achieving those sustainability goals within Green Globes. But as far as a preferred square footage, I would say no. Nina, what would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that I see too many trends based on square footage.
Right.
The minimum square footage that you have to be at in order to pursue a Green Globe certification is only 400 square feet. So we've got buildings that range from very small to, up to 1 million plus square feet, some of the really high-rise buildings.
Right.
Is there a number of units preferred too on that, or no? Is square footage more the?
There has to be at least 4 units for a multifamily property to certify.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have just one question. As we went through the ordinance process, I heard quite a few comments from the local development community about how Florida is different, and one of the examples that they gave was air change requirements or credits being based on the amount of air change, and that's going to be somewhat at odds with the energy efficiency. So with the flexibility that's in Green Globes, have y'all seen any conflict there, or is there another way to get air quality point rather than just having a change of air?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I honestly am not completely sure about that. That's something that I might want to check with one of our more technical experts on, because I haven't seen specifically on air change handling.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Kent, and all the work we do in Florida, I've not heard that. But that doesn't mean that's not very much the case. And so I would love to kind of ping some of the counties and groups that we work with and pose that question, because I'd love this feedback. I'd love to hear what you're hearing. So if you don't mind, I'd like to elevate that question to some of our other teams, maybe in Miami and other areas, just to kind of hear what they're hearing, because that's something we definitely need to know and have in our back pocket.
Sure. Well, and I expect if it's not coming up, then there are workarounds. So that would be good. Okay. Well, I really appreciate Emily and Nina coming today. It's been a great presentation, and the presentation has been recorded. We are going to post it on our YouTube site, and we're going to use it in future outreach on green buildings as we get closer to the November 1st date. We are really looking forward to that.